Good morning, Rabbi Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Berachot, and we are holding on Daf Mem Gimel Amud Aleph 43a. That is on the bottom of the Amud. The limud of Amud Yomi for Chodesh Kislev has been dedicated by Shahab and Shara Zarabi, the health, happiness, prosperity of the entire family, and Aliyah B'Torah, also by Aaron and Miriam Zaguri. Leilui Nishmat Idit Bat Miriam, that the Neshama should have an Aliyah. Amen. So we are discussing the halachot of brachot, and today we're going to have a lot about different besamim, the birkat nehenin, things that you benefit from. So far, we discussed things that you eat. Now there is a hana'ah of re'ah, the benefit that you have when you smell good smelling items, and we're going to discuss that. The first white line. See in the middle of the line, Tiyufta, that's where we left off last time. Amale Rav Chisda Rav Yitzchak. Rav Chisda told Rav Yitzchak, Hai Mishcha de Afar Semon, when you have Shemen Afar Semon. The way they did it was, they basically pickled and cooked different besamim inside oil, and that's, oil that smelled great. And the reason they had it that way is because oil stays much longer, and therefore you could have the spray or the mishcha, the cream of good smelling stuff, stay on you for a longer time. So if you have shemen afar semon, says the Gemara, what bracha do you make on it? On one hand, afar semon itself is borei atzeh besamim. We already mentioned that in the Gemara before, because it is an etz, it is a tree. On the other hand, here you don't have the tree. You have gotten the smell of afar semon inside a shemen. So do you say now aseh besamim, or do you say something else? So says the Gemara, Amale Hachi Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda, the student of Shmuel and Rav, the legendary student of Rav and Shmuel, he said, Boreh shemen artzenu. You say the bracha of Boreh shemen artzenu. What does that mean? Hashem, you created the shemen of our land, Eretz Yisrael. Farsemon was something in Eretz Yisrael. Now you have Boreh shemen artzenu. Amaleh. So he told him, this is a dialogue between Rav Chisda and Rabbi Yitzchak, right? So Rav Chisda asked the question, and Rabbi Yitzchak answered it. Rabbi Chisda answers back. He says, no, bar mineh to Rabbi Yehuda. So I know Rabbi Yehuda's shita. Rabbi Yehuda is not applicable to all of us. Why? Because he is a chovev tzion. He's a Zionist. He loves Eretz Yisrael. He loves Eretz Yisrael so much so that he puts a bracha specifically on this shemen afar semon. How about the rest of us, right? What bracha do we make? It says, bar mineh to Rabbi Yehuda. The chaviva le Eretz Yisrael, le kule alma mai. He loves Eretz Yisrael so much, but regular people, what's the actual, in abstract, what is the bracha of shemen afar semon? So says the Gemara, Amale, Rabbi Yitzchak answers, Hachi Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan paskin boreh shemen arev. The bracha that you make is boreh shemen arev. Hashem has created a shemen that is arev. Arev, from the language of arevna, is pleasant. It is beautiful, right? Boreh shemen arev. So that's the bracha you make on shemen afar semon. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Ada bar Ava. Rav Ada bar Ava said, Hai kasharta mevarchin ilave boreh aseh besamim. Kasharta, you make on it boreh aseh besamim. What's kasharta? Kosht. Or kost, however you say it in korbanot in the morning and in the afternoon. This is one of the 11 samamanim of Ktoret fame, right? So that also, says the Gemara, is boreh aseh besamim. Aval mishcha kevisha lo. But if you make an oil which is pickled kavush from it, very similar to what we just mentioned by shemen afar semon, says that you don't make bracha on shemen of kosh. If you take the same species of kosh, and you pickle it inside oil, and the oil now absorb the smell, you don't make the bracha of borei aseh b'samim because you don't see the kosh, you only see a shemen. So what do you mean borei aseh b'samim? You have to see the aseh b'samim to be able to say the bracha on it. Remember that even by shemen afar simon 2 minutes ago, we didn't say aseh b'samim. We only said what? Borei shemen arev, borei shemen arsenu. You say the bracha on the shemen, not on the actual thing itself. So now this actually has a nafkamina. Many other Sfaradim love to say bracha of besamim on what they call golab. It's a rose water. How do they make rose water? It's actually mostly made in Lebanon. And they have a massive pot, and they put the tons of the flower petals of rose water flowers, smells amazing. And then they cook them, and on top of the massive pot, they have another pot, which is like a funnel backwards, right? An upside down funnel that seals itself to the ledges of the pot, and it comes up, and there's a pipe on top, and it distills the water of the boiling pot, and that turns into what we call golab. Now it's a little bit more complicated, the process than this. Therefore, we left off. By the way, I once asked many years ago, I was looking into the kashrut of golab for Pesach, right? Many people use this in everything, right? They put it in their tea, they put it in their ice cream, they put it in faludah, they put it in all kinds of different things. So, and we were not actually able to find out if it's kasher for Pesach. You say, what's the problem? The problem is many times they seal this ledge of the pot together with the funnel on top with, say it, dough. They take dough. They either have to do it with cement, but that's harder, it's dirtier, it falls into it, and it's not edible. So the easiest is just make some dough and smear it around the whole thing for the few hours that you need it. You take it, you trash it, you make a new dough for the next batch, right? So that you will have literally you will have chametz on your pot. So and there's no hashgacha over there in Lebanon. You try to go to Lebanon for hashgacha, see what happens. Like, so that's why it's really not kasher for Passover. You want to be Moser Nefesh for the kashrut of golab, give me a call. So says the Gemara. So why is it a big deal, by the way? Because people make borei minei besamim on it. So now there are two things that's a problem. A, people say maybe it's synthetic, which synthetic things by itself you have to deal with. Do you make a bracha on synthetic smell when you have a beautiful cologne, whatever fumes? Do you make a bracha on that or not? You have to discuss that. So some people don't want to say bracha on it because they say, who knows, maybe it's synthetic. But bigger problem than that, I think, is many people bring aseh besamim, itzpeh besamim, and they bring this, right? They bring the rose water. So if you said aseh besamim, would that bracha cover the bracha of rose water? Is a question that we have to talk about it. So have this in mind when we're talking about the shemen, which is pretty much the same thing. Over there, maybe it's a little bit more because the juice of the petals, the flower itself goes into that distilled water, but it's really water that you pour in that takes the smell of the rose, the roses, the flowers that you smell good. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's see this together. Says the Gemara, on kosh we make aseh b'samim, but mishcha kvisha, if you make an oil from this, then no, you don't make aseh b'samim. But Rav Kana said, afilu mishcha kvisha, even on mishcha kvisha, you make borei aseh b'samim, but mishcha tchina, no. But if you have a mishcha tchina, that means you take the kasharta, you turn it to powder, and then you mix it a little bit of it with oil, and now the oil has the scent of this kasharta, then no. Nahardai Amri, in the Yeshiva in Nahardea, in Bavel, they would say, Afilu Mishchat China. Even Mishchat China, what's the difference? So you didn't have the whole thing in it, cooked or pickled. You put some powder in it, but the smell is coming from kasharta, which is in the oil. Then the oil is just preserving it. So why wouldn't he make the bracha? Rambam Paskins, this Nahardai, says, even Mishchat China, you would make on it Borei Aseh B'Samim. Amar of Gidol. So this, by the way, without getting into further details, this will tell you that you have to be very careful when it comes to this, especially people who they have yortzeit askara and so on. They want everyone to say as many brachot as possible. So they find any besamim under the sun and they bring it over there and they give you the hadas for aseh besamim, and they have this the ispeh besamim that they bring, and they bring the rose water. So if you're saying aseh and ispeh, you certainly should not say a bracha on the rose water, because you already covered it according to this with the aseh besamim, and something to be careful and to be mindful of when you go through this askarot and you say bracha besamim. So says the Gemara, Amar Rab Gidel Amar Rav, Hai simlak mevarachin ilabe borei aseh besamim. Right? Simlak, Rashi says Yasmin, aka Jasmine. And Jasmine, mevarchin ilabe borei aseh besamim. Amar Rav Hananel, Amar Rav, Hani chalfi diyama. The chalfi diyama are some, small bush. And says the Gemara, you say on it, Rav Hananel says, Hani chalfi diyama mevarchin ilabe borei aseh besamim. You say borei aseh besamim because they're hardwood. Now let's see. This is going to develop a little more. Amar Morzutra, Mikra. What's the pasuk? Vehi elatam agaga. She took them on top of the roof, on the rooftop. This is referring to Rachava Zonah, when at the end of 40 years in the Midbar, Moshe Rabbeinu already is gone. They want to send a second set of spies, Meraglim, instead of sending 12 and making a whole big deal out of it, they sent only 2. They went cheresh, they went quietly to the city of Jericho, to Yericho, to spy the city. And they go, and where do you go when you want to have information? In the Jewish world, when you want to hear everything, go to mikveh, right? Over there, you go to the Rachava Zonah, but that's the, only Michael relates to this, right? All the news, right? Yeah. So they say the king wanted to know what's happening. They told him to go to the mikveh. So he goes, the Goyish king goes to the mikveh, completely dressed on, and see everyone is quiet. What's happening? Shh, the king is supposed to come to the mikveh today. That's the Jewish news. But the Maaseh, you go to Rachava Zonah because she was the pundakit. She was the coffee shop of the town, basically, and everyone would go through the shop. And the story is that of course they go there. She recognizes who they are. She was very smart. She gave them refuge. She hid them from the king that was looking for them, and she took them on top of the roof that they should stay the night. And then in the middle of the night, she lets them down on a rope and says, "Okay, I saved your life. You saved my life when you come to conquer Eretz Yisrael." They swore to her, and so on and so forth. That's the story of Rachava. So when the pasuk talks about it, it says, "Vehi elatam hagaga." She took them up on the rooftop, but titmenem bepishte ha'etz, and she covered them with pishte ha'etz. So that is the raya that is considered etz. Says the Gemara, "Hi narkom." Narkom is roses, basically, right? It's chabaseret hasharon, Rashi says, which is roses. The Gemara says, depends. The ganonita, the ones that you grow in your garden, the gan, mevarachin lave borei aseh besamim. You make on them borei aseh besamim. The dabra, but the wild ones in the midbar, that they grow borei isbe besamim. You say borei isbe besamim on them. Why is that? So Rashi says because the ones in the midbar, they're much softer, even though that this is also rose, basically is the same flower, but because they don't grow as strong, you make isbe besamim because now it becomes like a bush, not like a tree, right? Now Rashba says over here, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, or the Gedolei HaRishonim, he says this is really the same thing, but in your garden you take care of it. When you take care of it, you prune it, you water it constantly, you revive it constantly, and it grows to become something thick and nice. And even though that in wintertime, it loses all of its leaves and small branches and so on, next season, it grows it again. So therefore, it becomes like an etz. But in the midbar, when they wildly grow here and there, nobody takes care of them. So it's a 1 year thing. They grow, they dry completely, and they're gone for next year. Maybe the seeds will grow somewhere else. So therefore, you make a borei isbe besamim, which is a very interesting thing because you have the same species, you make two different brachot on it depending on where it grows and how it was kept, which is an interesting thing. Now, having said this, and going to the next Gemara as well, the Rishonim talk about, let's see the next Gemara and then we say this. The second wide line. Hani sikli, Amar Rav Sheshet, Hani sikli, mevarchin alayhu borei isbe besamim. Violet, you make, what bracha do you make on it? You say borei isbe besamim. Now, because that's considered a bush. Now, the Shita Mekubetze, the Ra'ah, two names in the Rishonim, they say, by borei aseh besamim, by the bracha on smelling items, you have a clear difference between that and the bracha that you make on fruits when you want to eat them. How so? It says, when you say a bracha on borei aseh besamim, borei isbe besamim, even though that they are low on the ground, once they are strong pieces of wood, that's called already asa. You don't need to actually have a tree to say borei aseh besamim. Even if it's a bush, but it's something that stays for next year, and it's a woody thing. It's not like a vegetable. It's not a vegetable. It's wood. You say aseh besamim. But what borei pri ha'etz, what bracha do you make on strawberries? You say what? What bracha do you make on Moses in Arabic, right? On mose or on bananas? Adama, the trees are big, but Adama. What bracha do you make on pineapples? Adama. Why? Because you have a different criteria for what is considered a tree. A tree, because you say borei pri ha'etz, it has to be a tree. It's not just the wood of aseh besamim. Aseh besamim, anything that's like wood, you say aseh besamim. But borei pri ha'etz, you're talking about a tree. Etz in that context means a tree has its own criteria. It has to have a trunk, that the trunk stays from year to year, and it has to have a certain height to it. So you find the Rishonim talk about if it's lower than 3 tfachim, it's already like on the ground, and you'll say borei pri adama on it, even though that it is a bush that stays and it has all the other criteria of a tree, but lemaaseh, it's not a high thing. It's not called a tree. You don't call a tree something that's less than 3 tfachim high, right? Or if the trunk stays and all of the branches fall like the tree of bananas, that also is not considered necessarily an etz. Maran in Shulchan Aruch writes Moses, right? He calls it Moses, bananas. Because we have safek, we say aned borei pri adama mi safek, because we mentioned before already in the beginning of the parak that ha'adama covers ha'etz, but ha'etz does not cover ha'adama, right? If you say ha'etz on cucumbers, you have to say bracha again. But if you said ha'adama on apples, you're good to go. technically speaking.
With regard to Atse, and Mine, like if you have a septic and you're not sure, like, is it a hard branch? Is it not? What can you say to it?
You ask a rabbi.
Okay, so you can't.
Right.
It's better not to say anything.
No, we haven't said that, but we're going to still discuss. Yes. So says the Gemara, Borei Isbe Besamim you say an Sigli. Amar Mor Zutra, Haiman de Morach Beetroga, O Bechavusha. How about if you're smelling a good fruit, a good smelling fruit? Right? You have an etrog, you want to say bracha besamim on it. What bracha do you make? Says the Gemara, Omer Baruch Shenatan Reach Tov Beperot. You say the bracha, the Hashem, you have created good smelling fruits, or the way we say it, Hanoteh Reach Tov Beperot. Different girsaot in the bracha. Now the Rishonim over here say that you have to be careful. Rashba, you have to be careful. This is only when you pick up the fruit in order to smell it, or you pick up the fruit in order to smell it and then eat it. But your kavanah originally was to smell it as well. Masha'enken, if you picked up the fruit just to eat it, and then as you're biting into it, wow, that's some amazing smell over here, then you do not make any bracha on it. Why is that? Because the things that you make the bracha of besamim on, borei aseh besamim, borei mineh besamim, borei isbeh besamim, is when they have been planted for smell. Now, this has not been planted for smell, has been planted for eating purposes. So at the very least, if you want it to be considered besamim, you have to have in mind in the beginning that I'm taking this for besamim to make it a besamim. Otherwise, on food, you don't make bracha of besamim. Besamim is something specific for good smelling items that are meant to be used as that. So if I am having an apple and I bought it to eat it, I took it to eat it, and then as I'm eating, I say, wow, this is amazing smell, you don't make any bracha on it. But if you have an etrog, which is not muktzeh for mitzvah, that's another question. If you have an etrog for chag, until the end of chag, you make no aseh besamim, no hanoteh reach tov b'perot on it. Until after the whole chag is finished, then you say, okay, fine, it's no longer considered muktzeh for its mitzvah. Now I can make a bracha on it. Many people used to put tziporen inside the etrog. The whole thing was covered with tziporen, and they would keep it until next year for Havdalah as besamim, right? So etrog is something that people use as besamim, but given that you want it as besamim, not as ochel, or for both of them combined. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Haiman de Nafik beyom Nisan, very famous Gemara in Masechet Berachot Mem Gimel Amud Bet of Birkat HaIlanot as we know it. Haiman, this is it. This is where it happens. Haiman de Nafik beyom Nisan, a person that goes in the beyom Nisan, in the days of Nisan. V'chazi ilani de kamelav levi, and you see trees that were completely dry, looked like a piece of wood, and now all of a sudden this wood is blossoming, beautiful flowers. Omer Baruch shelo chiser be'olamo klum, yiseh bracha shelo chiser be'olamo klum, ubarabo beriot tovot ve'ilanot tovot, that Hashem has created in this world, beriot tovot, great creatures, ve'ilanot tovot, great trees, lehitnaot, or some people have the girsa, lehanot bahen bnei adam, that people should benefit from them. That's the bracha we know as Birkat HaIlanot. Now, this actually became a source of a massive machloket between the Mekubalim and between the Poskim of how about if it's not Yomei Nisan. For instance, in Los Angeles, this past year, well, before Adar even, you had, in Shvat, you already had trees blossoming. Can I make a Birkat Ilanot on Shvat or on Adar? It says B'yom Nisan. It says if you go out in Nisan, you say the bracha, right? Or some cities like in higher up north, let's say, in Northern Europe, or you don't have to go that far. In East Coast, when it's cold, you don't get any blossoms until end of Nisan. Many times, hopefully, by Iyar you have blossoms. So did you lose the bracha of Ilanot? And many of them would want to say, Maran Chida even brings this. He says, well, it's Biyom and Nisan. The Gemara says Biyom and Nisan. You have to be specific about it, and so on and so forth. But the Maaseh, the Ritba in Masachat Rosh Hashanah and Daf Yud Aleph says something amazing. It says, and there are others as well who say this afterwards. We found we did not have a Chidushay Ritba until about 100 years ago. They were printed and found, the manuscripts were found. We had Sakim from Ritba that was brought by other Rishonim, but the actual massive set of Chidusha Ritba we didn't have until pretty recently, past 150 years. So therefore, many of the poskim, earlier poskim, didn't see the Ritba. So Ritba says in Masachet Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Aleph, he says, Yom Nisan Lav Dafka. So this is the time, it means the Tkufa of Nisan, means the time that things start reviving, and it's basically your season of blossoms, which we call it spring. Now, imagine if you go to South America, everything is opposite. The southern hemisphere, you go there in the winter here, it's summer for them there. You go in fall, that's where it's spring for them. So what, you think because their Nisan is the same Nisan? Right? They follow the same Nisan, Iyar, the Shavuot, and Pesach, and everything is the same way we have it. But the Maaseh, there's no blossoms in Nisan. So what, you think they're not going to make Gad Lalot? So no, you make Gad Lalot because we go after the blossoms, and the Gemara is Lav Dafka. The Gemara is saying, normally speaking, it's Beyom Nisan, in the days of Nisan. But then you have the Mekubalim, the Kafachayim, the Maran Chida, as mentioned, they say they're based on Zohar Kadosh, that there are other concepts, deeper concepts, that the Neshamot come in Chodesh Nisan down to this world, and many of them go as Gilgul in these blossoms and trees, and the bracha that you make really releases those things, and so on. And hence the Kaf Chaim goes as far as saying, Harabadi he goes to town with this in a footnote in his Teshuvah, in Chelik Arif of Chavedat. He's very, very unhappy with this Kaf Chaim. But Kaf Chaim Pascha says on Shabbat, you should not be saying Birkat HaIlanot. Harabadi actually, to give credit, Chacham Badia says, L'chatchila, you could be machmir like that. But if it's the last day of, or the days are passing, and you think the blossoms are not going to be there anymore, and so on and so forth, say it. Kaf Chaim says, why not? He says, because when you say Birkat HaIlanot, you're taking out this neshamot that are in the Gilgul, in these trees, and that's like borer on Shabbat, right? It's like borer. Harabadi says, well, where do you get borer on a spiritual concept? Where's the makor for that? So he's very, very much not happy with it. But nevertheless, this is the spectrum of the halacha on this Gemara that we just mentioned of Hayotze B'Yom Nisan, that we go in the season of Nisan, which is really on springtime. You make this bracha, and the Rishonim say, what's the reason? The Rashba, I think it is, he writes, the reason is because the thing looked dead. Because the tree looks like a piece of wood for past few months. There's nothing there. You break it, it breaks. It's not soft even. There's no juice inside, nothing, dead. And all of a sudden you see this wood, and then there's beautiful flowers on the wood. So that change, the revitalizing of the life of the agricultural system and the world at large is something that we make the bracha on. Okay, it says there's a lot to be talked about this. Outside city, inside city, two trees, not same trees, which we're not going to get into. Says the Gemara. Amar Rav Zutra. This is 6 lines down from the white lines. Amar Zutra bar Tuvia, Amar Rav. He said in the name of Rav. How do you even know that you have to say bracha on reach? We've been speaking for past 20 lines about Who says you have to make bracha on it? Now, Rabotai, if you would pause right here and you would be fighting this out, what would be this clear answer so far without needing the Gemara? You get pleasure and say bracha because we had a few pages ago. How about that? That the reason we make bracha when you eat an apple is svara. We wanted to bring different psukim, and remember a whole daf of Gemara, and then at the end we surrendered. We dropped our heads and we said, "Oh, it's svara. It's a logic. Asur lehanot mehaolam hazeh belo bracha. It's asur to have any hana from this world without bracha." And kol haneneh min haolam hazeh belo bracha keilu ma'al. If you benefit from this world without bracha, you are like a mo'el be'ektesh. When you have hektesh and you use it without permission, that's a me'ilah. That's you're a trader. You're taking something that's not yours. So why can't that be the same svara here? I have a beautiful rose. I want to smell it. I'm having hana'ah from it. Why can't that be the svara? So the Mefarshim write something amazing. They write, why? Because the halacha in Masechet Pesachim, Daf Chavav, page 26, the halacha is reach. If you take something that belongs to Ekdesh and it smells good, and you smell it, there's no me'ilah. That's not considered enough hana'ah that you will be mo'el behekdesh. So therefore, exactly it fits. Not only it's not a kasha, that is the explanation of this Gemara. That because the hana'ah, the benefit you have from a good smelling thing, is less of a category in hana'ah, to the degree that if it was hekdesh, if it was part of the kodshe bet hamikdash, I would smell it without permission. I would not be in transgression of me'ilah. Therefore, maybe you could have it without bracha. The whole reason we said we have to make bracha on things we eat is because of the logic that's like hekdesh. But by hekdesh, you wouldn't transgress if you smell it. So maybe we need a new thing. Says the Gemara. How do we know that we make? Now it's a better question. Now it's a stronger. How do you even know that you have to make bracha on smelling things? Hashem has created smelling things. You benefit from it, right? You benefit when you take a hot shower. You make a bracha. Maybe you should, especially in this season. Why we don't make a bracha, right? The Rashba, by the way, asks this question. Rashba says the reason it's even though they have amazing pleasure, cold winter, you go, you take a nice, beautiful hot bath. You don't make bracha. It says hana'ah hanichnesat leguf. A hana'ah that enters your body is what you break bracha on, not the hana'ah. And he says even reach, you smell it, it goes in. That's why you make a bracha. Let's quickly cover this. Says the Gemara. How do we know that we make a bracha altogether on reach? I don't make a bracha on shower. I don't make a bracha on rubbing oil on my body and having various pleasures that's there. Says the Gemara, Shneimar, Kol neshama tehaleliyah. All the neshama should thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, ezu davar she'haneshama neenet mimenu. What is it that the neshama has pleasure from it? Ve'en haguf neenet mimenu. But the guf doesn't have any pleasure from it, but the neshama only has pleasure. What is it? It's the chush hareach, the sense of smell. By the way, the Rishonim write that that's the reason we don't make bracha achrona on reach. When you eat food, you make a bracha in the beginning, you make a bracha afterwards. Why don't you make a bracha after smelling something? Because there's nothing there. When you stop smelling, stops the hana'ah. There's nothing that's in my stomach. Right, you eat food, you're full for the next hour, hopefully, right? But by reach, you don't have it. It's just the neshama that pleasures from it, right? This is not a full takana, of course, but it's important. Let me tell you, just so we'll finish with this, a beautiful thing. The insight in this is that Adam HaRishon and Chava, when they sinned, they were metameh. They destroyed with the kedusha of 4 of their senses, right? Ta'avahu le'enayim, that's the chush hareot, right? She saw the fruit and she desired it, right? Nechmad lemar'eh, right? Hava le'inaim lemar'eh, that's sight, right? Shmi'ah ki shamata lekol ishtecha. That's the chusha shmi'ah, right? Of course, the touch, right? Beautiful and taste. That's obvious. The only chush, the only sense that was not destroyed, the kedusha of it was kept intact from before the chet was what?
Smell.
The chush of smell. Therefore, it's called a neshama. The neshama, the pure neshama, before Adam HaRishon, before the het, is the chush hareach. It's the sense of smell. So that's why the pasuk that we have for it is kol haneshama ta'aliyah al-riyah b'ezrat Hashem. We'll continue this tomorrow morning, Rabotai. Just before you get up, a quick announcement. Tomorrow, as many of you already